So it will be a pretty big understatement to say that I have a long history with the KEF LS50s. In fact, it was a kind of a love and hate relationship. I got my first KEF LS50s way back, and I sold it almost right away because I absolutely hated it. And the reason was because perhaps I was driving it with crappy AVR. And so I decided to buy it again and try it with my Meitner monoblocks. Vintage, but very good at the time. And eventually I got Hagel H120, and then I moved up to the Hagel H190 all-in-one integrated units that I love so much. And that did the KEF LS50s much justice in my opinion. And then I got the KEF R3 to review, and then I bought the KEF LS50s again, sold it back and forth. I think I've owned at least 12 pairs now, not at one time, but selling it and then buying it again because they were so affordable in the used market and I made an entire video about this, by the way. I'll link it in the description below. Not a very good video. I ranted a lot in that video. But basically, I was saying that people are selling it for so cheap because they hate it because they don't drive it with proper amplifiers. These are speakers that's relatively hard to drive, at least in my opinion and from my experiences. They need some good amplifications to really make them sing. And then KEF tells me they've made changes to the KEF LS50 and that now they have the KEF LS50 Meta. And essentially what this Meta is an improvement to the original design. As you can imagine, it's been a while since they had the LS50s released. So they did some modifications to make it better and even more musical. Now the price for the KEF LS50 Metas haven't changed from the original KEF LS50's pricing. However, now the LS50s are kind of put in the back and now they're being cleared out. People are selling it for lower prices than the KEF LS50 Meta, of course. So the question is it worth the extra dime to buy the KEF LS50 Meta versus the original KEF LS50 original? That's going to be the thing that we're going to be answering in this video. So make sure to subscribe and click that bell notification so that you don't miss any of these videos. And let's go straight to it. So first of all, the improvements they made to the speakers, they're still the KEF LS50s. I think you've heard this in other reviews as well, probably people talking about it. It's a small improvement, big improvement, doesn't matter. There's still the KEF LS50. It's not like it's a total new design. It still sounds like the KEF LS50s. It still has that great imaging from the dual concentric driver, and everything you hated and loved about the KEF LS50 exists with the Metas. Except few of those problems with the original in terms of sound has now been resolved in the Meta, but we'll talk about that in the later part of this video. The main thing about the Meta speaker is that aside from the little tweaks they did to the drivers to make it better, the main thing is the Meta, which is why they're called the KEF LS50 Meta, the Meta material. Basically, they work with this different company who works with acoustical designs and came up with this 30-tube disc design that absorbs most of the high frequencies inside the cabinet. So basically the tweeters have its own chamber. It absorbs most of the back wave so that it becomes a more cleaner response, less distortion, yada yada yada. But what does this mean in terms of its actual ability to be musical? Well, both of these speakers sound pretty darn good. The KEF LS50 still sound darn good. The thing is, the Metas is a slight, just ever so slight upgrade to the original LS50. Now, if you already have the KEF LS50 or can find one for a very good price, my suggestion is go with the KEF LS50, get an amplifier like a Hagel or NAD, something that can drive it properly, and add a little bit of that tube magic in the preamp section, in the DAC section or whatever to smooth it out. But if you don't have the budget, or if you don't want to add tubes or make it a little bit more smoother, well, essentially what this KEF LS50 Meta is exactly that. It has a cleaner response in the higher frequencies. It's just cleaner, more crisp, and it helps with imaging a little bit as well because it's cleaner. But the main thing is the high frequencies are much cleaner sounding, yet it's less fatiguing than the original KEF LS50s. It's smoother on the top end. Now, however, the upper mid-range on the Meta is significantly smoother, at least in my opinion, than the original KEF LS50s. So the upper mid-range is smoother, it is less forward sounding, it still has that excitement on the top end, but it sounds overall more refined because that upper mid-range now is a little bit more refined, smoother. So it conveys music to me, at least more emotionally. So when I play tracks like Ode to Boy, live version, or Somebody Already Broke My Heart, those little nuanced details that has a little bit of sharp edges to the sound is a lot smoother on the KEF LS50 Metas than the original KEF LS50s. And this helps with the overall musicality because it both has tremendous dynamics, but now I can turn up the KEF LS50 Metas a little bit higher in volume than the KEF LS50 originals because it is a little bit less fatiguing and it's a little bit more less in your face. So that smoothness goes a long way to bring out more dynamic capability in the speaker. And the other thing that I noticed is that the louder volumes on the KEF LS50 Metas are cleaner. I can audibly hear less distortion, less grain, less of that sharp edges in the sound and instruments and vocals. So that goes a long way when you want to hear the speaker for a very long time or keep it for a very long time. Amplifier matching and component matching is a lot easier now with the KEF LS50 Metas because now it's smoother. So I don't have to buy an amplifier to kind of compensate for the KEF LS50's high frequency or the mid-range. And so now I can go and get whatever I want, Hagel, NAD, or whatever it is, and it will still be smoother and give you a little bit more of that musicality and smoothness while still being quieter in the background, while still retaining the details, the nuances. So yes, the differences are pretty small. So it's small enough for me to say if the KEF LS50s are on a good price, then buy the KEF LS50s instead of the Metas. But those small little improvements on the Metas goes a long way. And it kind of reminds me of what my audiophile friend once said to me. He said, Jay, little things matter. And it matters because you listen for a long period of time and you notice those things in a long listening session. And I have to agree, those little things go a long way when I'm listening to music and the Metas are just a little bit tad smoother, a little bit easier to mate with any amplifier or component, and can crank up a little bit higher than the normal LS50s without being fatigued. Those little things do matter. So absolutely, the KEF LS50 Metas are better speakers than the KEF LS50 original. There's no question or doubt about that. Now, there used to be an industry saying when I used to work back in the high-end retail store, saying that the highest competitor, the biggest competitor to a manufacturer is not their manufacturing competitors, but actually their old products in the used market. And I have to agree in this case, this is literally their biggest competitor, the old LS50s, because they were already pretty darn good. Yes, the KEF LS50 Metas are still very good and still better, but if you can find the KEF LS50s for a bargain price, now that the KEF LS50 Metas are out, why not? And I have to be honest, that would be actually a better deal because the improvements from the KEF LS50 to the KEF LS50 Metas are subtle. They're not huge. But the differences are just big enough that those people who were not fans of the original KEF LS50s because they saw and heard those weaknesses in the original KEF LS50s may now actually be a fan of the KEF LS50 Meta because that little tweaks to make it smoother and more musical goes a long way for some people. And so it really depends on the listener to decide how big of a difference it is. For me, it is not much of a big difference because I really did not mind the original KEF LS50s and I was a fan of the original KEF LS50s to begin with. And so other than that little upper mid-range smoothness and the high frequency smoothness, the sound staging, The bass quality, the dynamics, everything is very similar to the original KEF LS50. It is not a entirely different speaker to begin with, so that's what you expect. The imaging, however, is slightly, ever so slightly better, like I've mentioned on the KEF LS50 Metas. So that's pretty much it. Now, what I am very excited about is actually the KEF KC62 subwoofer that is actually on its way to us right now as we speak. So that is a subwoofer that is supposed to be mated with the KEF LS50 or the KEF LS50 Meta specifically. And so I'm very excited about that because a subwoofer can go a long way with KEF LS50s and KEF LS50 Metas. And if this small subwoofer that looks amazing on paper can do what it actually says it can do, then this is a game changer for the overall KEF LS50 family. So make sure to be subscribed for that video. You don't want to miss that video. And that's pretty much it from me. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if this video was helpful to you. And also consider supporting us on our Patreon to keep us independent and keep these honest videos and reviews coming. Until next time.